Bioenergy Hub, Supergen Hub CMG meeting, and I'm excited to announce there are a couple of opportunities for ECS, particularly there is a big amount of travel grants. So please keep an eye on our share emails and Supergen Hub emails. So the application form will be published very soon. And also the ECR policy event is coming up. Please, if you have not signed up yet, please do sign up. It's a bit of get out of our comfort zone and learn some other activities, or get involved with policy engagements. And one more event is coming up during just before Christmas, is Christmas quiz and network event. It's the first in-person event for this year, so we're excited and we're looking forward join us and have our network meeting in person this year. So with this, so today we have this is our fourth lunchtime lecture series. Today we have Dr. Anita Shepherd. So she will be talking on bioenergy, carbon capture and storage from Miscanthus, if I pronounce correctly, and its environmental effects. And many of you might familiar with her. She's an industrial fellow. Have been working with partner companies and its growth to refine crop field in commercial settings, and also she involved in development of a global model for bioenergy crop growth and environmental effect on energy production. So with this, I would like to invite Dr. Anita. The screen is yours, if you're ready.
Thank you very much, Santosh. I'm very happy to give the lecture today for Supergen Bioenergy Share Group. As Santosh referred to, this work would not be possible without previous and current funders and industrial and academic partners. Currently, I'm working very much with Aberystwyth University and Terravesta, and funded by Supergen. And I thought today I would give some introduction to Miscanthus for people who don't know it, and then have a look at some previous results from previous projects that I've done on global yield, soil water, soil carbon, end of century projections. And we'll look at the countries with the highest potential to capture carbon via Miscanthus from modelling work that I've done. And also we'll have a look at the sources of uncertainty when you model carbon capture and storage. These result very much so from either the model or the input data used. And then we'll go and have a look at some recent field work and grower survey that I've done, and my plan for the 2021 modelling work on Miscanthus. Well, basically, Miscanthus, let's see, get the next slide. It is a perennial crop, and its big feature is that when it grows, the mature crop, it stores its nutrients in its rhizome, and it reuses them for the next year. And a lot of the benefits that come from it come from that very feature. It grows, emerges from the ground around March, April, particularly April. By the end of May, I've measured it previously around about a metre. They can vary a bit more, a bit less, but generally a metre by the end of May. And although that was a hot year in 2019 when I measured them, they are about 8 metres high by August, September. And by October, you've got the leaves senescing and falling that decompose, left to decompose on the ground. And then the stems senesce, and you can see a picture here of the stems. These then are left to dry out over winter. And by about February, March time, especially in February, it's all go that you've got the contractors coming round, chopping and baling it for harvest. So you get these giant bales, and they send the bales to certainly in Lincolnshire and in Norfolk, in Brigg and Snetterton, you've got small 40 megawatt power plants that are burning miscanthus here. But the bales aren't the only product. So the company Terravesta, that is the coordinator of all of the miscanthus production and its use, really, they've also got these compressed pellets that are being produced, which you use in biomass burners, furnaces, and you've also got these briquettes that people can use on their fires. And miscanthus is also used for horse bedding. Well, if we look at some of the benefits of miscanthus, these are pictures I've taken from measuring it in about May, June time. Because of this fact that it recycles its own nutrients, what that means is that a mature crop, although you put a little fertilizer on it to get it going, a mature crop does not need fertilizer. And it can grow on low-grade land. So it's not necessarily replacing food crops. It's been found to grow well on low-grade land. And because of the lack of fertilizer, a mature crop that's got no pesticide or fertilizer being sprayed is actually village friendly. Out of 10 crops, 10 different locations in the UK that I looked at in 2019, 4 out of that 10 were next to playgrounds in villages. And the farmers would say that, yes, it's more acceptable. Sorry about this. My screen keeps jumping to the next slide. It's village friendly. They put it next to playgrounds, and but it is a crop that when you walk through those tough leaves that have dropped on the ground, it will shred your boots. It shredded my Wellingtons, and so I actually I did wear some rigger boots the next time, and even those, I don't know if you can see on the screen, even those started to get cut. So it's quite sharp. That actually keeps away crop vandalism, which is a problem for farmers. Kids can play on bales of hay and things like this, but they don't play on bales of miscanthus. It's also because it does not require land management apart from the harvesting. You find evidence of scat of various wildlife. You see them in it. You see the leaf debris attracts spiders and beetles all the time. So I found plenty of spiders and beetles in fields. This varies, some more than others, but they're usually there. And in Lincolnshire, where the brown hare is, although nationally the brown hare is supposed to be quite rare, you see lots of brown hares. They like the miscanthus fields. It also leads to the farmers being able to locate site a crop more remotely away from their own farm, so because then it's not requiring management during the year. And so one farmer I met, he'd bought up an old airfield and he was growing miscanthus there. Some farmers, because of its continuous cover for a long time, they also will raise some game beds on it for some extra income. So it does have a lot of benefits. I model miscanthus. I'm not going to go into modelling. It's not a modelling lecture, but I'll show you outputs from the model I develop. Miscanthus model is developed by Astley Hastings, and myself, I take care of the spatial aspects, the spatial version of the model, and augment it with extra things. And basically it wants climate, soil, land use, geographical area, and a year range. And it will output a specific year, but usually we use it for a year range because it will tell you if the crop, if the area is too dry or too cold, and if the crop will be killed. And so it gives a good indication over a range of years what percentage of those years it is viable for, which is what the growers want to know. Not if it's going to be killed for a certain year, but the percentage you could expect it to be successful for. So you get out of it, it will model the growth, you'll get the yield, the energy, and carbon emissions. So we know how much carbon is being converted into plant matter, how much carbon could be captured in the energy when it's used for energy, and the change in soil organic carbon as well. An example of our outputs, this was from the NERC Feasibility of Afforestation and Bioenergy Project, FABGGR, and this is under the RCP 2.6 climate, which is a gentle climate projection, assuming that you do have carbon capture mitigation of the climate. This is an end-of-century projection for 2090 to 99, and it's showing the yield that you could get yield as high as 27 tonnes per hectare in Latin America, but very much for the UK, farmers really expect to get about 8 to 12 tonnes per hectare, but that may change, of course, by the end of the century. So that's an example of output, but it's not how the model outputs it. That's got a plotting that is very much, it plots it for anywhere in the world, dependent on if the crop will grow, and it's climate limited. This is the model output that has been further reduced in spatial area by, on the GIS, by a bioenergy land use projection by the integrated assessment model image. What that does, this is showing you the typical output of the model. It's of my model, Miscanthus. But this one has reduced the area for the bioenergy land use projection by image, because that brings in socioeconomic factors. And by doing that, you can bring socioeconomic projections in with your crop growth model. So let's have a look at some of the other output by Miscanthus. We've got here mean daily water deficit through the season. And you can see easily that the largest area for the highest soil water deficit is the centre of the US, which is very arid. This is an area that would only be possible in growing it if it was irrigated. And so we can, related to soil water deficit, you can look at the fraction of years the rain-fed, natural rain-fed miscanthus is killed by drought. By the end of the century, this, again, you can see it's the hot, dry areas, particularly North America and Mediterranean countries to an extent. And the model also shows the soil carbon change. Usually if it assumes a low carbon arable soil, because we're assuming nobody's going to grow the crops on high carbon peatland anyway. So that usually produces an increase in soil carbon in the low carbon areas. Because you've got a lot of leaf matter that is dropping onto the ground and decomposing, and you also have root exudates that are being excreted into the soil. So it increases the carbon content. Now, the highest carbon capture and soil sequestration by countries have been calculated by the spatial model for the start of the century on the left and the end of the century on the right. And in all cases, Brazil comes up the highest. This also did have the socio-economic bioenergy projection land use from the image integrated assessment model. And we found that Brazil would be the highest country with the highest potential for carbon capture and soil sequestration. China, the second. And then it varies after that becoming by the end of the century Venezuela and Myanmar, and also by the end of the century the USA as well has a high potential. Obviously not the centre of it unless it is irrigated. We also have output for the energy generated, gigajoules per hectare per year in Europe here, and what we can see is where the climate is limiting growth, the lower the yield, the greater the relative cost of energy production, the lower the energy produced. And now I'm going to talk about sensitivity from, this was results from the UKEC project, the UK Energy Research Centre. Now you've got two sources of uncertainty. You've got the uncertainty that is in a model, and you've got the uncertainty that is in the data. I'm sure that there are other sources, but these are two major ones that I've investigated. This is a sensitivity analysis chart that I've produced from the Miscanthus Model, and you can see that there's a relative change in the parameter. So you change one parameter only and leaving all the others the same. And then you see what difference it makes. What difference it makes in the dry matter yield. And what came out of this was that the yellow line and the green line, their field capacity and wilting point, parameters for the water holding capacity of the soil. And they had a far greater effect on the yield than the climate, the temperature and precipitation did. That is important to see in relation to the next results from the data, so that the model is more sensitive to the soil water holding capacities than the climate. So it took an England case study, and I simulated projections from different input. I used 8 soil variants of the same HWSD soil database, keeping the climate the same. And then I used 12 climate variants of the same climate ensemble, the RCP 8.5 climate projections. It's got 12 cohorts. And I kept the soil the same on that. And what came out of that is that the BECS and the yield, the BECS being dependent on the yield anyway, that had a greater uncertainty when you change the climate projections than when you changed the soil data sets. This is important in relation to the model because the model was more sensitive to soil data sets. So the fact that when you changed the data, it was more sensitive to the climate gave more confidence that the data was creating that uncertainty and not the model. And we have some of the uncertainty here. So on the left, we've got the mean of all compound projections from soil and climate cohorts for the century, basically, 2008 to 80. On the left-hand side, that is the UK BECS potential, the average per year. And on the right, that is a map of the uncertainty, the standard error, which shows the influence of climate and soil together, because the higher uncertainty, the lighter blue areas, are largely in the south and east, which suffers from more water shortage and lower soil moisture. And also, it very much tracks and follows the areas of chalk, like the South Lincolnshire Wolds and the South Downs, and they create a greater uncertainty within soils for all the different results that are influenced by different soils and different soil waters. So that's uncertainty. Oops. in summarising it, basically we've got outputs from the Miscanthus model, and using the Miscanthus model with the integrated assessment model, by the 2090s we got a global increase in bioenergy land area globally to 193 megahectares, and the potential to capture and sequester 543 megatons of carbon a year. And the countries with the highest carbon capture potential due to climate and projected land use were Brazil and China. The soil water holding capacity impacts the yield, and yield is limited in water scarce regions. And this potentially could be improved by using locally suitable Miscanthus species, or hybrids, newer hybrids, or irrigation. And globally, Miscanthus sequesters carbon in low agricultural soils up to 0.6 tonnes per hectare. And the models and data sets associated with yield projections affect uncertainty. So when you do look at projections for carbon capture and storage, notice which model has been used and the data that has been used for input. Now I'm going to have a look at the current work I'm doing and planned with Supergen for my fellowship. We'll look at what I'm doing is the current commercial Miscanthus crops are propagated by rhizome, and this is costly and there's a delay to growers, but because that is propagated rhizome to rhizome, but they're developing new Miscanthus hybrids, and those are propagated by seed in warm climates because seeds won't grow and produce in cold climates. And then they take the seeds into the country they need, like say the UK, and they're grown into little rhizome plugs. And that has the production, the capacity, the potential to upscale the production and the provision of energy crops. And those are currently in field trials and nearly ready to go out into to be produced for the growers. So my aim is to investigate the potential they have relating to growth and energy provision and carbon capture and storage. And I also harnessing the grower experience in determining the benefits and obstacles to grow Miscanthus. So first of all, I'm going to start first with my last one, the grower survey, how they saw obstacles and benefits of Miscanthus. What I've done here, this was a whole learning curve for me. I like to mix up modelling with talking to growers and industry, grower surveys, and measuring crops. And for the survey, it had to be anonymous. It's still out there, so I haven't got the results yet. It's out there and people can grow. It's for growers to fill in until the end of October. And it was a learning curve because I had to use a Snap software for the survey and it had to be anonymous. However, the industrial partner, Terravesta, came up with a very good idea. They said, why not give the growers an incentive to fill in the survey? Offer them some beers. Well, there's a bit of a problem with beers because with alcohol, you're getting into a dodgy territory there. So I decided on a cheese hamper. So this is currently up on the Terravesta website. Win some cheese and contribute to the future of the Miscanthus bioeconomy by completing a short survey. And then it goes down to the survey that I've created. And so what we go through with the Miscanthus survey is questions about the farm, profiling the grower so we know what type of people maybe invest in Miscanthus, and we want to know their experience of the benefits and drawbacks of Miscanthus. And do you consent to your data being used anonymously? If they say no, then they're taken out of the survey. If they say yes, the survey carries on. And I'll put here, if I do it, I'll do test. Because they don't have to answer all the questions. What we're doing is just trying to encourage them to answer as many as they can. So I go through this test, and it tells it wants to get an idea of do they implement eco-friendly schemes, and their profile, and what they do. Do they believe in what they're growing? Have we found Miscanthus to be beneficial or not? And I'm going through this quickly because what I'm showing you is, in effect, to do a survey like this, what you've got is 2 surveys. You can only do it technically on software if you've got 2 surveys, because you've got a push-pull effect. You've got 2 things that are opposite. You're trying to offer someone an incentive to fill in your survey. You're saying win a cheese hamper, but to do that, they have to add their email address. But you've already told them that the survey is anonymous. So what you've got to do is you've got to create 2 surveys. The first one, which is the Miscanthus survey, is anonymous. It does not take anyone's name, but when they press submit, it goes to a second survey, completely separate, that has no bearing on the first. You can't relate the answers there into the first survey. And it says, do you wish to be entered into the draw? If they say yes, they ask for your email address, and then I would get simply a list of email addresses for the draw. And this is the way standardly that when you get a commercial, fill in our survey and win something, that you can be anonymous, but at the same time they'll be able to collect your name for their draw. And so it works pretty well. I'm going to show you, let's see. So that's the Grow survey. I also have looked in 2019, 2021 at growth versus age in Miscanthus. Miscanthus does grow larger each year and produces more yields. In fact, the crop will start growing wider and wider as the rhizome grows, and then very old crops that are even 13 years old will start infilling in the middle. And we are able to put a curve through this and predict the yield that we'll get from older crops on average. And this worked quite well with an R-squared of 0.74, 0.75 in 2019. And there weren't too many crops that I added in 2021, but when we fit that, this is pretty similar. So growth versus age yield. Now this is new this year, emergence fieldwork comparing the new Miscanthus hybrid with the current commercial crop. This is a field of the new commercial hybrid, the new Miscanthus hybrid that's been developed, the seed propagated one. And this is Miscanthus terms giganteus, the current commercial crop. And I looked at the height of the leaf tip and also the stem top in brackets. And this was on the 24th of May of a very, very cold spring. And these 2 crops were right next to each other, just separated by a hedge, basically the same field. Same weather, same soil, same everything. But the heights of the hybrid, 33, 28, 33, and the heights of the Miscanthus giganteus, 21, 20, 22, the height was greater in the hybrid. Much bigger difference was the number of green shoots. Number of green shoots per plant was 24, 30, 27, 28 in different quadrats, the averages. And in the commercial crop, which was right next to it, it was 8, 5, 6, 4 shoots. It's incredibly different. And this was in Royal Wootton Bassett, where they've got a trial crop next to the commercial crop. So by that we could see in the same site that the new Miscanthus hybrid seems to emerge robustly and much earlier than the commercial crop. However, in Lincolnshire, further north, I seem to get very good results with the commercial crop, much better than the commercial crop in Royal Wootton Basset. However, that muddies the waters, but nevertheless, these two are well compared, being the same field. I did look at the difference in the weather from local met stations, and there were marginally more sun hours in Lincolnshire than there were in Royal Wootton Basset, which could explain why the commercial crop was so good in Lincolnshire compared to Royal Wootton Basset. But the temperature and the rainfall were higher in Royal Wootton Basset anyway, so the jury's still out on that. However, what I can show you is a video. I apologise for the shaky nature of it, but that comes from standing in a freezing cold wet field all day. But this does compare the two fields right opposite each other. Here is a view of the Miscanthus hybrid, and then we pan round and you see the next field and how poor it is with the commercial crop. And as you can see, it's still really not emerged. The yields could be very similar, we don't know that, but the Miscanthus commercial crop by the end of May that was very cold has not emerged, yet the hybrid has been very robust for a cold spring. Oops, right. And my planned future work is really concentrating on the modelling. I've linked up with the GRACE project. It's international, especially throughout Europe, and they have GRACE project field trials on various of these Miscanthus hybrids, and they're using 4 different cultivars. I can't say which because that's commercial protected data, but there are 4 sites in the UK, Germany, Italy and Croatia, and we have here 4 different sites and different cultivars. And parameters measured are for growth, yield, height, light interception, fresh weight, dry weight, stem weight, leaf weight, stem count, and for the damage, frost damage, and lodging and flowering date and plant survival. And I'm using those to create parameters for the hybrids in the model, so that I can run the model to look at the potential for growth, yield, energy, and carbon capture in the Miscanthus model. All of this would not be possible without the teams that are leading the important projects involved in Miscanthus research, including Astley at University of Aberdeen and his team, Professor John Clifton Brown and Danny Orty Carroll at University of Aberystwyth, and Dr Jason Cam and Sophie Wildsmith with Terravesta Bioenergy. And thanks to my Supergen mentors, Ian Donnison and Dr Rebecca Rowe, and current and past funders for the other projects that I've been on. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Anita. Really is, in-depth talk. I enjoyed listening to you. Yeah, so now the talk is open for questions. If you have any questions, please do raise your hand. You can text in the chat box, or you can ask yourself. Yeah, meanwhile, I do have a question. So you said in terms of climate is more like USA and Brazil and China are more suitable for miscanthus growth. But there is also like promising data from UK. How do you see in terms of farmer income when compared with the other food crop growth?
Actually, for the it would vary for countries, and I can't speak for other countries, but I do know that in the UK, the farmer income is very good. It is comparable with what they're getting for wheat. However, it's kind of satisfying to see that for the farmers that I've talked to, they've the reason that they've grown miscanthus is that they've grown it on lower agricultural grade land, but land that was not producing a viable yield for wheat. So that seems to be the way it's going. But they're being paid a good price by the company for their miscanthus. The way they're paid is changing at the moment, I believe. They're looking into at the moment whether they want to be paid at harvest for at the beginning of the growth of the crop, or at the harvest afterwards, or if they're paid gradually through the months. So how they're paid varies, but the prices are very competitive against cereals. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, thank you for that. So there's also a question from Chai Jasleen. Is it suitable to grow miscanthus in countries that do not have 4 seasons, such as Asian countries?
Well, I think miscanthus originally comes from Asian countries. It is possible to grow it in Asian countries. Certainly, the model and the climate indicate that. It may be more suitable to grow different cultivars of miscanthus, different types, like Miscanthus sinensis and various other types in various countries according to their climate. And this is a thing we've kind of struggled with in a model, in that we would like to ideally have different cultivars and how they relate best to the climate factors in the model, but we've not got that far in developing it yet. They certainly do grow very well in Asian countries. They really like hot, moist climates. But as regards the UK, it does very well. I mean, you can expect, at the moment, you can expect a crop to be 9 to 12 tonnes per hectare on average around England. There is, of course, a northern boundary. So once you're getting into Scotland, later with the climate projections, you're seeing larger yields in the southeast of Scotland, but generally at the moment there's a northern boundary beyond which frost would kill off some of the miscanthus, so it wouldn't be survivable.
Yeah, so there's also a follow-up question on your model, how flexible your models are. Like can be applied to other crops like switchgrass?
Yes, and I think at the moment they are being Miscanthus is being applied. There is plans to develop it into switchgrass. It's also being developed into willow. I'll be using it in another project for certainly willow and miscanthus. There's also, I think, a poplar version. It is a case of just altering the coding and developing it for different plants and parameterizing it. Yeah. But for that, the biggest barrier and hurdle for a modeler is plenty of data. So that's what we need: plenty of field trials for some good data on growth.
That's true. But you got nice data. You've been working hard on this. That's great to see such data, really. So one more question from my side, like. Is there any waste management with this miscanthus growth?
I'm not in the part of using any waste, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of waste in the burning of the growing of it and the burning of it for bioenergy with power stations. The leaves that senesce and drop, they're left on the ground to decompose into the soil. The stems are cut and baled and burnt at the power station, and there isn't really wastage.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Right. So there's also a question. So you mentioned there are factors influencing how the miscanthus will grow. Some of these factors might also impact its characteristics and composition. Do you see the miscanthus potential variability as a downside for this crop?
I think throughout the UK it grows similar, I think.
Right. So he also says, he also says, Paula, I guess, from Astley University. He also says many people have studied, for example, variations in ash and metal and moisture, etc.
Okay, that does not come into my area of research. That's outside of my area because I don't look at ash and metals in miscanthus crop growth in the model.
Right.
But it's a good area to join up with, though, of course, and potential. You do want to look at things like that. I would be particularly interested to see how the metals, if you use them on waste ground, which I do believe it should be used more on low grade land or old industrial land, I would be interested to see how much of the metals actually incorporated into the plant and if that affected it by burning. I agree.
Right. How do you see the government role in promoting miscanthus growth in UK? Are they willing to support farmers, particularly in UK? I'm talking.
I think there's a big push for renewables, but so far there's not as much support from the government as you'd like to see. I think we'd like to see a lot more support for growing bioenergy because, as I've mentioned, there is so much potential for the benefits of it on the soil, on wildlife, and benefits to the growers too. It's also very good, very village friendly, if you like, as well. So this actually comes into a lot of other areas when developing policies. For example, the replacement for the EU agricultural cap. This is factors I believe should really be taken into account to encourage the use of bioenergy because of their co-benefits with so many other things. The other factor that I think should be really supported by policy is carbon capture schemes, because actually most of the climate projections you see assume that there will be mitigations in place of carbon capture for power stations. And if these could be developed, we could even see if they would be possible on different scales of power stations. So at the moment, bioenergy is being used with smaller power stations and local ones. And that is less miles to drive to get to the power station.
That's right.
Yeah, but I'd like to see much more policy support for bioenergy and carbon capture schemes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are looking forward, more support on bioenergy-based, renewables. So there is a, contribution in future, and particularly in achieving net zero target. I must say. So there's also a question from Joy Jocelyn. One more question. So apart from the benefits of miscanthus that you have mentioned in your slides, does miscanthus have any other benefits when compared to other bioenergy crops?
I can't answer that one too much because it is what I've focused on so far in a lot of developments, and I have not focused on the other bioenergy crops so much. That will change. I have my next project. I am intending to focus on other crops as well, but I haven't heard this particularly mentioned. So I would be interested to see why people choose to grow them. I mean, a lot of this and why people grow them is dependent on the grower and their particular situation. And that is often related to who they feel comfortable in working with, the distribution company, whether they're a company that they're familiar with for willow or miscanthus. There's a lot of influence on growers of what your neighbours are growing as well. And because it's also a lot about trust. So I think that will influence it as well. But as for individual benefits and between them, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I see your data is until April or May 2021. But like, is there any issue, or why did not you monitor the data during the whole summer?
Because that's up to people who do field work. Essentially, I am a modeler, and I've got the focus is the modeling, and I go out and augment it with some other data and some field work to mix it up and make it interesting. But largely my data for modeling really comes from whole time series, big projects that have spent enormous amounts of grant funding on in large scale on sites across Europe, and they're monitoring the crop growth all the time. I like to usually take a week or two out at certain times of year and look at a feature. Like previously I was looking at spring crop growth, and I looked this year at emergence because it was a very, very cold spring. But I am not able to do a continuously monitored time series as well as the modeling. Usually you split your skills. So.
Right, so I don't see any more questions. With this, so if no questions, let us thank Anita Shepherd once again for excellent talk and in-depth talk, I must say. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I think, so that's it from this lecture series. So we'll see you all in again in next our event. I think ECR event is coming up, and also there's also, I think, volunteer required for COP related COP26 event, I guess. Anyone, if you are interested, I don't have more detail on that, but if anyone are interested in voluntary work, so please get in touch with Emma or our share members. Thank you so much. Bye.